Okay, well, it's on right now, so.
When the torpedo was fired at us.
Yeah, well, go ahead. Finish your story.
Oh, well, okay, I pointed out the window down to and I said, you see that sub down there, it says 419? Well, that's my boat. And he just scowled at me, just really scowled at me. And I said, you said I'd never get one, but that's mine. And I just turned around and walked out. Come down and keep looking back because, like I say, he was so tough, I expected him to pounce on me any minute. But anyway, I shouldn't have threw it in his face like that, but I did want him to know that there are people who get what they should have despite other people who are trying to keep them out, to try to create problems for them. And so then I went on back, and I didn't go see McLaren, or I didn't go see any of those other people, because I decided, well, you got out of there with all your teeth, you better just leave well enough alone. Anyway, let's see now, you said you wanted to,
what about well, we need the mittens, but the girl that thought you should have horns.
Oh, yeah, I was in the USO there in Portsmouth, and so we were talking to these girls there. I don't remember Cooley and probably Mueller and some of the guys I ran around with a lot. And so these girls wanted to know where we were from. Well, I told her I was from Arizona. And she said, oh, Arizona, oh, there's cowboys and all this stuff. One of them wanted to know if I'd ever seen a Mexican with his silver saddle and all this stuff in his horse. And I said, most Mexicans I knew never even owned a horse, much less a silver saddle. And but this stuff they'd seen in the movies. And so, but anyway, this one, I said to him, well, I live in Arizona and I'm a Mormon. And these girls said, oh, come on, you're not a Mormon. And I said, I am. Well, I'm not. You're not either. And I said, well, why do you think I'm not a Mormon? Well, because Mormons have horns. And I said, really? Well, I don't have horns. Of course, I said, if you want to feel right here, you can see where I was dehorned. But I figured that was a jovial way to do it. And rather than just say, well, that's stupid to think like that, I just said, yeah, I was dehorned, you can tell right here. And then I laughed and I said, yeah, I don't know where the stories like that start. I said, human beings don't have horns, whether they're Mormons or who they are. And anyway, that was kind of a funny experience with them. And then the other one was
the mittens.
Three little kittens.
The mittens.
Oh, the mittens. Well, now that was when we got back down to New London on the Tyrone. And it was cold. I mean, it was, even though it was, well, wait, it was in December. That's right, when we were down there. By the time we got in commission, had our shakedowns, went to Newport for a while, went only there about 3 days, down to New London for several days, and that's when I went into New York City and saw the city in there. We spent 3 days in there. I called Grandma from back there. But anyway, we needed mittens. We were up on lookout, and it was cold up there. And the Navy issued you, with your uniform, you had to pay for it, this was your original uniform, some knit gloves, just black, navy blue knit gloves. But those things didn't keep your hands warm. You needed those leather covers with the sheepskin inside to keep your hands warm. Well, they had them there at the base, and I saw them, but some of the other guys had them, the other subs. So I said to this officer, it was one day when most of the officers were gone, and this officer, he wasn't the smartest guy in the world, and he didn't stay on there very long. He got off, I think, when he got to Pearl Harbor, and they got another officer in his place. But anyway, I said to him, we need some of these leather mittens. It's so cold up here on lookout. And he said, well, okay. He said, how many lookouts are up there at a time? Well, there are 3 of you up there at once, right? And I said, yeah. And then he said, and yeah, the quartermaster, okay, well, I'll okay an order for 8. of these mittens, 8 pair of mittens.
Didn't you suggest 8?
Well, I think he did.
Because
But in the
of what you-
conversation between us, we arrived at 8. And so then, I filled the thing out, and I put 8.
Wrote it like
Over,
a
I
check.
wrote 8.
It's like a check. You
Wrote
write
the
it.
word, yes, like a check. Put 8, and over here I wrote an 8, and he signed it. And then I took it and I put a Y on the end of 8, so it said 80.
Because you
Put a
told me
0.
one time that's why you picked 8, because you had to add the least amount to
No,
change it.
just to change. Well, 7, would you
T.
could say 7T, but anyway, I did that and took it over and got 80 pair of those mittens. Brought them back to the ship, put them in my locker, gave each one of the lookouts, not just the 5 I worked with, there were 6 of us, but not just to those guys, but I gave them to each of the groups, so all the lookouts had them. I gave a pair to each of the quartermasters, there were 3 of them who were serving up their topside. I took in some for the officers because that was part of the conversation. But he had said, you guys can change the mittens. You can change the mittens. You don't need to, everybody have a pair. When you go up there, get the mittens from the guy that's on. That's why he only okayed 8. And so when I got 80, I gave the officers 2 pairs, all I gave them, because I didn't want them to know that I had enough for every one of them to have them. I just gave them 2 pairs that they could trade. But all the enlisted men, I gave every one of them their own personal ones. And I still had a pair of those somewhere. When we moved, I still had
We
them.
used to take them hunting.
And, but anyway, nobody ever came after me. The police never came after me for that or anything. But then another time, we were out at Guam, and we stood watch on deck there at night, well, day and night, and it rained. This rain squalls had come in and rained all over us. This when we were between war patrols. And so we didn't have raincoats. And so you'd go up there to relieve the guy, and he's soaking wet, and then pretty soon you're soaking wet up there. And so I went to the officer, and I said, we need some raincoats up here. And he said, well, all right, I'll okay. I think I don't remember if he said 1 or 2.
How about 8?
Well, not that time. Whatever he said, I changed it to about 10 times that many. And I went over and threw out all these raincoats and gave one to every guy that stood watch, who's going to be standing watch up there. Well, here's your own raincoat. Gave it to all the guys.
We got that one at the house, that gray one. Got that gray raincoat that's yours. I've got
Yeah,
it in the closet, it's
yeah,
got your name.
And, but never said anymore. Now, what I kept thinking was sooner or later, these supply people are going to start comparing the carbon copy with the one where they issued me the stuff, and they're going to notice the difference. And then I'll be up there in Portsmouth prison looking out through the bars. But nothing ever happened there. But while we were still at Portsmouth, there were bicycles, yellow bicycles all around the place there. And they were issued to certain people to ride around the base. And some guy had ridden his bike and parked it somewhere along there. And we were leaving the barge to go back up to the chow hall to eat. And this bike was sitting there, and it was a government bike. So I just got on it and rode it to the chow hall. Well, when I came out of the chow hall, then I rode it back down to the barge. And then I rode it back to the barracks. And for 4 or 5 days, every time I went to the barracks to the barge, I was riding this bicycle. And then one day, I rode down to the barge, and I set it there, and when I went back up to go somewhere, it disappeared. The bike was gone. And I thought, now some other thief has been at work here. So anyway, we had this first-class electrician on there named Evans. And so there's a phone on the barge, in the base phone. So I went up to the barracks and I called down to the barge, and because I knew Evans was on watch there. And I said to Evans, I said, this is Captain Brown. I said, my yeoman had a bicycle that he left there beside your barge, and you were on watch at the time, and that bicycle disappeared. Now I said, I want you to find that bike and get it back down there by your barge so that he can come and get it. So I want to put right where it was when it was stolen. Now you get that bike back down there. And hung up. Then I walked down to the barge, and as I walked on, Evans says, hey Harris, what happened to that bike you had that you were riding around there? I just got a call from Captain Brown, and he was really mad, and he said I had to find that bike because it belonged to his yeoman. And I said, well, I don't know who took it. I was parked out there. But how come he wants you to do it? And he said, because he said I was on watch and I was responsible. And I said, well, then you better get out there and find it. Well, he never found it, and I never said any more about it to him.
The captain never called back.
And Captain Brown, yeah, never called back again.
What was the other one when you called?
Well, the other one was we were going ashore over to Portsmouth.
Oh, you were wearing the marine.
Yeah, and I had on my pea coat, and because it was cold, it was November, and we're going over there to town, and as I'm walking across the bridge, because there was a bridge that you had to go from the base over to the mainland, and a car bridge, but we were walking, and you could catch the buses out then beyond the bridge going into town. And so here I am walking out that bridge with another guy, I think Mueller or one of them, and here comes a couple of my buddies coming back. They're walking back across the bridge towards me. And I said, where are you guys going? Well, they won't let me take my leather coat out. The Marines won't let me take it out because I don't have a pass, and you're supposed to have a certain chip there of some kind that shows you can take it out, like you're taking it to laundry or something like that. And so they won't let me take it. And once you got ashore, a submariner could wear a leather coat, he could wear jockey shorts if he wanted to. Nobody really cared what we did once we were ashore. But these Marines, they wouldn't let us get out the gate unless we met their requirements. And so anyway, I said, well, here, give me the coat. And I took off my pea coat, and I put the leather coat on, and then I put my pea coat back on and buttoned it up. And I said, we'll just walk out this way. But I said, let's don't stay together because we don't want the guy out there to know we're together. So I said, you just wait back here and I'll go on out, and then give me 5 minutes or so, and then you can come on out. And so we agreed to that, and so they stood back there at the other end of the bridge. And I'm walking out, and what I didn't know was this Marine had gone across the roadway there, and there's a knoll on the other side. He'd gone across and gone up on that knoll, and he could see us down there changing the coats. But I didn't know that at the time. So as I'm walking across there, and probably Frank Mueller was with me or one of those guys, why, Marine steps out there and he said, hold it, Mac. He said, what do you have on under that pea coat? And I said, well, I have on a shirt and a pair of pants, and I have on my jumper and a pair of pants, and I have on an undershirt and a pair of shorts. Why? Well, unbutton that pea coat for me. And I said, well, you don't need to see me in my pea coat. It's cold. I was trying to stall him. He said, open the pea coat or I'm going to keep you here till you do. He said, by the way, I went right up on that knoll and I saw what you did down there on the bridge. And I said, well, then you don't need to see my pea coat open, do you? He said, no, I really don't. He said, come with me, and took me into the office. And The other guys came in, but they hadn't done anything, so he didn't do anything to them. So I go in and sit down there. Now, I took the coat off, and I took the leather jacket off and gave it back to Jackson, handed it back to him, and sat down there. Now, what I had on that day was this uniform that I was buying from Richardson. Richardson had got a new tailor-made uniform. This was a tailor-made that I bought from him, but he'd put on some weight, and so he'd got another new tailor-made, and he wanted to sell that one. Well, it cost about, even back then, it cost about $50 for a tailor-made Navy uniform, but he was sold that to me for like $10 or $15, and it was a good uniform. And so I bought it, and I said, well, I'm going to wear it over to town tonight, just to be sure it's comfortable and wear it. Well, now here I am, the Marines got me. I'm sitting there at the table. He's on the other side filling out this arrest form. He says, what's your rating? Well, my rating was Seaman Second Class, and here I had a petty officer Second Class emblem on my arm. And I said, Signalman Second Class, that's S2C, which is Seaman Second Class. But I said, Signalman?
A jarhead.
Yeah, I said, Signalman Second Class, that's S2C. Now, Signalman actually is SM2C, Signalman Second Class. So I said that. And so he wrote it out S2C, because I didn't want this report going to somebody who knew I was Seaman Second Class, and they wanted to know how come I'm in this uniform with this deal. So that's what he put on there. And then he took my ID card and everything, and so I had to go back. I didn't even get to go ashore. Well, that didn't destroy my life, but anyway, then, let's see, somebody else. Well, he did take the other guy's cards, that's right. Took their cards too, so they had to go back. So anyway, now here we are, that's just before commissioning of the boat. This is like on a Friday night or Saturday, and our commissioning party is going to be the following Wednesday, and it's going to be held over off the base, over in town, in a nightclub. They rent the whole place and going to have the party over there. Well, I can't get off the base, and neither can these other guys without our ID cards. And how are we going to get them? We talked to the Marines again. They said, we turned all this over to the Navy, whoever they were, the authorities, and so we don't have them. Well, now, we're wondering how we're going to do this. So finally I said, well, let's do this. Let's call, let's find out where that is. And so I asked some questions, and I found out that this commander had them over at his office. He was apparently the disciplinarian for the base or whatever. And so I went into the Tiger-owned office. They had an office there in the building that was right close to where our sub was tied up to the barge. And I went in there and I picked up the phone and I checked the number. And I called this commander and I said, I'm calling from the Tiger-owned office here. I understand you have the ID cards for 3 of my men. And he didn't ask who I was or anything. He said, I said, it had something to do with a leather jacket or something the Marines had bought them in for. And he said, just a minute. And he looked and he said, well, yes, I do have 3 ID cards for 3 men that Friday night were going. Well, I said, we're having the commissioning party on Wednesday over at whatever the name of the place was, Moore Inn or something. And I said, these men can't go to the commissioning party without their ID cards. So would you give them, if I send them over, will you give them the ID cards, and then we'll take care of this here? And he said, well, all right, send them over. Now so we start over there, and I said, now look, I can't say a word over there because he might recognize my voice. So when we go in there, you got to do all the talking. I'm just going to stand there not saying a word. And so we went in, these guys, we rehearsed what they were gonna say. We got in there, they said what they were supposed to say. He got the cards out and gave them to us, and we left, and there we had our cards back. And so then when the commissioning party came up, we went to the party. However, they had forwarded the stuff the Marines had written up. That had been sent down to the captain, which the captain wouldn't do anything about men like this, that we were the responsibility of the base until the boat was commissioned. Now, when on Wednesday, I think the party was Tuesday and the commissioning was Wednesday, why then he was in charge, and so any problems that existed with any of these men now became his problem. So the next thing I knew, we get word, you're to report to Captain Cassidy. He wants to see you, and in fact, the three of us. And Free had whipped those Marines over there when he was drunk, and he'd been put in jail, and that came before the captain too. So Captain Cassidy, we went down to his office, and so he has these papers in front of him. And so I hear him say to Free, what happened? And Free says, well, I guess I drank too much, and that Marine was giving me orders, and I don't like to take orders from Marines. And so when he came back there and told me to get off the bus, well, I guess I just got carried away or something, and I hit him, and then, well, what he'd done was he'd hit about three of them and knocked one down flat. He was skidding up down the road with on his back, where Freeth hit him so hard. Freeth was the guy that lied his age, got into the paratroopers, went all through paratrooper school, and then his grandfather, who had lived, realized that he was going overseas, that this 16-year-old kid, was going to be over there in combat. So the grandfather notified the military people, and they discharged him because he was only 16. And so he had to be 18 to get in the Army. So he was going to have to wait till he was 18. So instead of that, just as soon as he turned 17, he joined the Navy, instead of waiting another year to get back in the Army. And so that's how we got him. But this guy was really one tough cookie. And so when he told this, why the captain said, well, those Marines do think they're pretty important. Now this is Cassidy. They think they're pretty important. They like to show off. Said, well, stay out of trouble, and gave him back his cards and everything. That's all. They didn't do anything. And then we came in there, the three of us. Now we're thinking, he's going to say, okay, which one of you pulled this, identifying yourself as one of our officers and going to go into this captain? I kept thinking, what's going to happen? He said to us, okay, what happened? I said, well, Jackson had a leather coat, and he wanted to take it ashore and wear it. And I told him what happened, and he says, those blankety-blank Marines, he said, they think they're so important. He said that these are probably guys that have never been in combat and don't know anything. And he just gave us back well, see, let's see, before they called us down there, they took our ID cards back again and gave them to Cassidy before we actually, after we'd been to the party, and then came back, and then as next day that they said, you're to report to Cassidy, and I need your ID cards. And so we gave them to him, and so he had them. Anyway, he just said a few choice things about the Marines and gave us our cards back, and that was all that happened there. But I kept thinking, somewhere down the line, somebody's going to compare something or find something, and I'm going to be in the Who Scout for the next 20 years. But that really was one of the main things when we had that shotgun in Japan.
That's on the list.
Browning shotgun.
Binoculars,
Browning,
shotgun.
And,
I don't think we'll give this to all members of the family. They'll think less of their father.
Well, I wasn't stealing
Impersonating
anything
an
from anybody.
officer.
All those things I got, we used there on the ship. They weren't just for me to take
So
and
far,
sell in the black market.
This is just a preliminary Navy career. I mean, this
Yeah, we
is
haven't gotten
before
there.
combat, so it shouldn't have offended anybody too much.
Yeah, and boy, those gloves came in handy because it was cold, and those really were nice. The mittens.
Well, we've still got your raincoat if you need it back.
Well, I don't know what happened in the move to it. It might-
I've got it.
You've got
I
it.
got the
Have
raincoat
you
hanging
got
in
the
my
tie-
closet.
Have you got the tie-grown coat too?
Do you have the fuzzy coat that has
Has the
the
tag
submarine
on on the back
painted
of it?
on the back?
I don't think so. I think you still have it.
It might be in there in that closet.
Let's start another story.
No,
At least
it's
some
not
valuable
there.
tape. I wanted to hear about the torpedo miss. It's one of the more
Oh.
important things.
Okay, well, we were out,
That's a semi-spiritual story, so I kind of like that.
we were out on our first patrol, and we were in the South China Sea. That was between the Philippines and Indochina, Vietnam now it's called. We were out in that area. And we had a guy named Burton was first-class gunner's mate. And Burton was the section leader on one of the lookout sections of 6 men. Had 3 sections, 6 men in each. I was the section leader as a seaman first class. I was section leader of my section. He was section leader of his, and he was a gunner's mate first class. And but anyway, I wasn't on watch. I was down below, and all of a sudden I hear the diving alarm sound. And that isn't too surprising because it could have been a plane or something coming. We were always diving from Japanese planes or whatever in that area. And but we dived. And then some of the guys that were on the bridge came down and said, we just had a torpedo fired at us and it just barely missed us. And so I asked them what they could tell me, just out of curiosity. Now we're down to a couple hundred feet down, so we're safe enough. And so then found out that Burton was on the wheel and the helm up there steering the ship. Now Burton had told us young whippersnappers, because he'd been on other submarines, he'd told us, if you ever get off course, why don't just turn it back like this because the boat will heel over and then the officers will look down and say, what are you doing? So if you get off a little bit, you're going operating by the compass because you can't see, and even if you could see, all that water looks alike up there. So if you get off and your compass shows you're off course, just gently ease it back slowly, and then they won't even notice up there, and nothing will be said about it. And so that made sense to me, and I got off course probably several times. Be turned around talking to the guy on the sound gear or something, and still be just a teeny bit of pressure on the wheel, and it'd be letting the rudder move a little. I'd look back and maybe I was 10 degrees off or so, so I'd just ease it back again. And all the guys did that sometimes. Didn't hurt anything. We're not on a street, we're out there in the ocean. So anyway, I talked to Burton about it, and I said, what happened up there? And he said, well, I got off course. He said, I was going along.
Did you feel the ship lean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we
You didn't
did.
mention that at the beginning.
Yeah, the ship rolled, but that didn't bother me any, because
You didn't know what the
if you're
command was.
changing courses, you're up there changing course because you're running zigzag, so that's happening all the time anyway. But he said, well, I got off course, and I realized I was 20 degrees off course. So he said, I just pulled it back on course. And I said, but I felt the boat roll before I heard the diving alarm. Well, yeah, he said, I just pulled it back. And he said, then he, of course, couldn't see the torpedo because he's down in the conning tower. And so I said, the torpedo came right down, I think, as our port side. And I said, if you hadn't have pulled that thing around that quick, it would have hit us, because they had fired at us expecting that was our course. They didn't realize that he was off course, and then when he pulled it, it went this way. And so the torpedo, instead of hitting us, this way, it went right down the side of us, just missed us. I said, how come you pulled that over, like pulled it around like that? You always told us don't ever do that. And he said, I don't know why, I just thought I should. And I said, but you told us don't ever do that. I know, he said, I know I told you that, but I just thought I should do that. And I said, well, I know why you did it. He said, why? And I said, because I have a lot of things to do before I die. And so if you died, I died. So I said, so you did it so I could stay alive. And he said, well, I don't know about that. I said, well, anyway, I'm glad you didn't, because if you'd have just started easing it back, it still would have hit us. That torpedo would have hit us. It's only because he turned it over there sharp that it just missed us, one right down the side of us. And there was a Japanese torpedo, and they had 1,000-pound warheads, so you just disappear when one of those hits you. So that was one of several miracles that happened in my life. Another time back there in the South China Sea, this plane came over, and they were picking it up on the surface radar because it was flying down so low to the water that the SD, the air radar, wasn't picking it up. We were picking up something that we thought was running on the surface, and it was coming from behind us, the same course we were on. And so it looked like somebody trying to catch up to us. The problem was that we didn't know of any ship that the Japanese had that our radar would pick up that could go more than about 30 knots. And this ship, whatever it was going 150 miles an hour. And so while they were puzzled about it, trying to figure out what to do, it was on us. By the time they reported it to the captain that this ship, whatever it is coming at a tremendous speed, why, before he could get to the bridge, it went right over the top of us. It was a plane. See, it wasn't a ship, it was an airplane. It was just flying so low that it was being picked up by the surface radar instead of the SD up in the air. And it went right over us, and the bomb bays were open, but nothing fell out. They went right on over us. Well, we had that thing submerged in 37 seconds.
Before they could turn around.
Before they could turn around and get back while we were underwater.
Was this in the daytime?
It was at night.
Oh.
And that water is really a lot of phosphorus in it there. And you feel like you could read a newspaper standing on the deck out there. It lights up so much. So you knew that those planes flying low like that could see that wake, that phosphorus wake. And so this guy was flying right up our trail, and had his bomb bay doors, because we looked up and we could see him, because he wasn't more than 150 feet in the air. And yet he went right on over us, and we dived immediately. And so stayed down there for a half hour or so, and then went back up in case he was circling around to get another shot at us. But that was another one of the miracles that happened is, why didn't he drop those bombs, or what? Or why would he just fly on over us when he trailed us, tracked us that far? Well, because I had other things to do here, and if he'd have dropped that bomb, I wouldn't have been here to do them. So,
neither would we.
Yes.
well, you might be here, but your name might be Gonzalez or something else.
Paco from Uruguay or something. Okay. I want to hear about the sinking of the Jap ship too, or the closest you came to sinking the Jap ship.
Well, we ran into a coastal freighter that was hauling goods. We didn't know what it was hauling, but probably food and maybe even some ammunition, out from Japan over to Aiyashima, which is a little island halfway between Iwo Jima and Japan. And this ship was traveling out that way, and it was a real rough sea. And so we couldn't fire a torpedo because
How
trying
big
to fire.
a ship was this?
Well, it was a coastal freighter, and it was probably
800 tons?
Oh, it might have been that much. It may have only been 500-600 ton, but it was.
Which makes about how long?
Well, I'd say maybe 100 feet or so. It wasn't a big ship, but probably 100 feet long. And see, our submarine was 300 feet long. So this thing probably was 100 feet. And a lot of wood in it. That's why they normally just ran up and down the coast where they were close in shallow water, but this one was going out to sea to take supplies out to that island the Japs still held. And so since we couldn't fire a torpedo because it was too choppy, and the danger there is when you fire a torpedo, if you're bobbing up and down like this, and you happen to fire it while your bow is up out of the water, and that, because it's just constantly doing this, that torpedo can come out of there and just run erratic. And it can run around and come back and hit you. So you never want to fire a torpedo unless it's going to be able to stay underwater all the time it's operating. And when you've got troughs there, 8 or 10 feet deep, why there's always a risk that it'll come out of one of those swells and into a trough, and the gyro will go haywire. And besides, you're not going to likely to hit the ship you're shooting at anyway. So we just wrote that off, that we wouldn't even try to fire a torpedo. But we were determined to sink it. So we pulled up as close to it as we could, and they opened up on us with 50 caliber machine guns, and so we backed off real quick. And I wasn't up on the bridge at the time this was happening.
But the 50s wouldn't punch through the hull.
Well, the 50s wouldn't go through our hull.
How about through the conning tower?
They'll go through they won't go through the conning tower itself, but they will go through all the metal shields that are around everything.
Superstructure, that
It's
structure
just
that's built
thin
on
metal.
top of the pressure.
Oh,
In fact, we had holes all in the superstructure there where it
Timber
went through
holes.
that thin metal, but it wouldn't go through the pressure hull because it's 1 inch
yeah, you
spring
have the
steel.
tube, and then you have the deck that's built
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the tube. So you're
Just
talking about it was going
built
through
on there.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're sheet metal, but heavy sheet metal goes down to form the upper deck.
Right, okay.
And we had holes all in that where they'd shot them up, but when they went through, they just ricocheted off
The hull,
steel
yeah.
hull. But so we finally decided maybe we could get them with the 5-inch gun, so they tried that. But again, we were rocking and bouncing so much it was really hard to
Couldn't
do.
get a shot.
And besides, they kept shooting at us with those 50s. And probably some 30s. There were other guns on their shooting, but the 50s were the only ones we really had to be afraid of. And so then we decided to surprise them. So we went into a rain squall. Well, they'd keep running into the rain squall to get away from us. And then we'd go around and catch them when they came out the other side, and they'd open up on us again. Well, we didn't want to get anybody killed up there on the bridge.
You could hear the shells hitting the
Oh,
hull,
yeah, you could hear them hitting the hull outside, yeah.
dinging.
Yeah, and so, so anyway, what they did was they got this guy Kelly, who had been a chief torpedoman, but he was really a rasty guy. I mean, this guy was, I don't know, Kelly reminded me a lot of Zimmerman there at West High. He even looked something like him. But anyway, he'd been married and divorced 3 or 4 times, and he'd get drunk when we'd be in port. And he was just a rasty guy. And they'd broken him from chief back down to first class. And he was a good torpedoman. He knew submarines and he knew torpedoes. So he was a good guy, but a good submariner, but not a very good guy. And so they put Kelly out there on the 20 millimeter.
No loss to
And,
America.
I figured if they got him, it wouldn't make all that much difference. I didn't want to get Fred David and some of those guys. But anyway, we set the 20 up on the forward, right forward of the conning tower, had it all loaded and everything ready, and then we pulled around so that they couldn't see the 20, turned around so that they were back here and couldn't see the 20.
So he was on the back of the conning tower.
Yeah, but everybody on the conning tower is ducking down, and so now when they get Kelly out there, because they can't see the gun, Kelly gets out there, straps himself on with the straps and because this 20 millimeter is a pretty good sized gun.
That's the one with the two shoulder
Yeah,
hooks
yeah,
that wrap around your shoulder.
Yeah. And so he gets himself all strapped in, and then he swings that gun around so he's just almost pointing at the conning tower himself. And then they turn, and when they turn, and just to where he can see the ship beyond the conning tower, he opens up with this 20. And the guys who were up on the bridge told me that wood and stuff was just flying in every direction. He just was cutting that ship all to pieces with that 20.
How's it fed in as far as ammo? Is there just an ammo case?
Oh, there's a drum there. There's a drum about this big around. And you, otherwise, it's like a 50 caliber or 30 caliber machine gun. It's linked. And so as you link these together, you have a crank on the side that comes off when you're through. But put it in there and you crank these and pull them inside on that drum.
Okay.
And so when you get fully filled, why there's a lot of shells in there. Then get the crank off of there and then mount it on the gun, and then it feeds it out right out of that drum because it's spring loaded.
It spits out the links.
Yeah, spits the links out as well as the empty shells. But he just blew that thing all to pieces, and to the point to where all firing from them stopped. He either killed everybody or destroyed the guns or something, because we followed them around a bit there and nothing. They never fired it.
But they were still moving.
Well, the ship was just wallowing in the water.
Oh.
We didn't know, and the wind was blowing pretty good. So we didn't really know whether they had power or whether everybody was gone and they were just floating around there. Because the way the wind was blowing and the waves were going, we weren't sure of that. So then they got guys up on the 5-inch and the 40 millimeter. And then they really tore that thing to pieces, and it was on fire, just burning just like some of these places in Iraq. Just a flame from bow to stern. And about that time, a Jap plane showed up, and so we didn't have any choice but to dive and get out of there. And so we never actually saw it sink, but it was destroyed. It never got where it was
never
going.
got credit for it.
So that was, yeah, they never gave us credit for a sinking, but it really destroyed it. Yeah, that was an interesting experience. Actually, I was on the planes, the stern planes, at that point, because if we had to dive real quick, why they wanted me on there. That was my battle station's surface. And, anyway, that happened, but I wasn't personally involved in much of it except being ready to do whatever had to be done.
I've got Tony Curtis on here.
Well, Bernie Schwartz.
So Tony Curtis was the name when he changed his name to.
Bernard Schwartz. Well, when I got off the Tigrone on the 3rd of July of 1945 and went aboard the submarine tender Proteus into Relief Crew 202, why, Bernie Schwartz was in that Relief Crew 202. And so they issued me a bunk up in the crew's quarters, and they had pipes running from the steel overheads down to the steel deck, and had the bunks hooked onto there with chains on a bracket on one side on the post, and then chains over here that went down. So my bunk is hooked onto this chain there, and it's hooked onto the pipe that's welded up down over here. And I had the top one. Now below me, about 20 inches or so, is another bunk, and the bracket welded on and hooked on this same chain, and clear down to the deck. So it might be 4 or 5 high there. And on the other side of the pipe, right over here, but I think he was a little lower than me, about 8 or 10 inches, was Bernie Schwartz's bunk. he likewise, there's a bracket on the other side of the pipe and a chain going down over there. And that was Bernie Schwartz. And so we got acquainted, and we went into Japan. When we went into Japan, why, then we were standing watch together. We took over the submarine base there in Japan, and we were over there, and in my section there were 6 of us. And I was third-class torpedoman at that time because I was promoted when I was on the first war patrol, when the captain promoted me to third-class petty officer. So anyway, there's 6 of us on that particular station there on the Japanese sub-base. And then down the road a ways, there's some more guys and some more. There were men at posts all the way around there. So we were guarding the entrance. There was a road that came from the town over into the base. We were right there, so we'd keep anybody out. There was other places where they had other guys doing the same thing. And so that's when I really got acquainted with Bernie Schwartz. He talked about maybe liking to go into acting or something. Said that when we talked there. But he was kind of a strange guy. And he was Jewish, but he always told everybody that he was Hungarian. Never told anybody. In fact, if anybody said, well, I thought Schwartz was a Jewish name, he'd say, well, it may be, but I'm Hungarian. And Schwartz is also a Hungarian name. Because Jews really weren't that popular, even here in the United States. Here Hitler's doing all he's doing to them, which was terrible. But even here in the United States, they weren't that well liked. And so here he was trying to make sure that we thought he was Hungarian. Well, anyway, I have a picture of all of us guys on that particular watch. There's probably 40 guys or so in that picture, and taken there on the base in one of the Japanese buildings. And he's in that picture, as am I, and Roy and all the other guys. This guy's last name was Roy, that stood watch with us there. And Bud Whittle was my buddy that lives up in Washington.
Changed
Castle
his
Rock.
name when he got into film.
But anyway, that's one. So now the war's over and we're back home, and one day Mom had a movie magazine or something there, and I picked it up. We were living on, this was probably before you were born.
24th place.
Living on 24th Place. And I'm looking at the magazine, and I said to her, hey, look, here's a picture of Bernie Schwartz. And she came over and she said, that's Tony Curtis. And I said, that's Bernie Schwartz. I know Bernie Schwartz. And so then we read the article, and then down in the article it said his name was Bernie Schwartz, but he changed it to Tony Curtis. But anyway, so Mom thought that was neat.
I
that
accused Grandpa sleeping with
I
Bernie
slept
Schwartz.
right beside Tony Schwartz, except for the posts in between us.
But they couldn't even turn over in those bunks.
Well, those we could.
Oh, I thought you said they were only about 20 inches
Oh,
apart.
20 inches is yay much.
Mm.
The ones we couldn't turn over in were the ones on the Maynard.
Mm.
When we got back to the States, they took us to Long Beach. And then they found out that our records were sent to Mare Island up in San Francisco. And so we stayed there in Long Beach for about 3 days and went to Thanksgiving dinner with one of Whittle's relatives. Whittle had a cousin or an uncle or somebody lived there in Long Beach. And Whittle had called him, and he'd said, well, hey, why don't you come over and have Thanksgiving dinner with us? And so we knew this was like the day before Thanksgiving, and we knew we were going to be there that next day. Then in fact, we didn't even know when we were going to San Francisco. So we caught the red line and rode over to his relatives and had a real nice Thanksgiving dinner, and then back to the Long Beach. But we'd come from Pearl Harbor to Long Beach on the Nevada. Now they decided they were going to take us guys, the submariners, up to Mare Island, because that's where our records were sent. So they put us on the USS Maynard, which was an APA, which was a troop ship that hauled the troops across the ocean. And I'll tell you, those bunks were only about this far apart. And you could not turn over in those bunks. They were just like the other pipes and chains, except that they were this close. And I could get into there on my back, because you hold on to the bunk above you. Everything's secure. You can hold on to it. It's not going to break. And swing in there. But then in the night, if I really wanted to turn over, I had to swing back out into the aisle, turn over, and come back in there on my stomach. And so did the other guys. And
Well, if you rolled over, you just bumped the butt of the guy
you
above
couldn't
you.
roll
Yeah,
over.
you couldn't roll
My
over.
shoulders were too wide to turn to roll over.
Well, it's just canvas, wasn't it? Was what your bunk was made out of, right? Or were these actual beds?
Oh no, it was steel frame and metal, just these metal, the springs. It wasn't springs up and down this way. It was just springs holding the wires. Just wire base, and then your mattress was on top of that, and the mattress was only about this thick. Well, but we were young. That part never bothered me. I was young. I could sleep in a tree, or I could sleep anywhere. That wasn't any problem. But you just couldn't turn over in those on the Maynard. Now on the Tigrone, those bunks, they were 20 inches or so apart. You could turn over. That wasn't any problem there. But when we were only on the Maynard one night, and that night they took us up to San Francisco, and it just overnight they were able to make that trip. We got off there in the morning, and the bus took us across the bridge and over to Mare Island, and then they didn't have our records when we got over there. That's where they sent them, but they didn't have them. And we spent, I don't know, another 2 weeks at least, with nothing to do but just wait for those records to come. And we decided one day, we'll just tour the country out here, since they don't have our records anyway, and we can't go. I mean, we were free to go wherever we wanted, but we weren't going to officially do anything till we had the records. So we had ID cards. We could get off the base. That wasn't any problem. So anyway, 3 of us decided we'd go in and see San Francisco. So we took along this, I don't know, probably an extra underwear and 1 or 2 things with us in a little bag, and each of us. And we got out on the road and hitchhiked, and somebody picked us up and took us across the Oakland Bay Bridge. And we went into town, and we followed we got in the cable cars, rode the cable cars, and we just went around, saw as much of the town as we could, and riding on buses or streetcars or whatever was running. And then, I don't remember how we did this, but we even went back. We got a ride across the Golden Gate Bridge to go back over to the other side to get to Mare Island. And somebody in a car gave us a ride or whatever, I don't remember. But I know we went across it. And then back to the base. So we stayed overnight there in San Francisco. Another night, we decided to go to Sacramento, that's the capital. And it's the other direction. And so we got out there and hitchhiked and went to Sacramento and looked around, spent the night up there in the hotel, and came back again. So we got some sightseeing in, and then finally our papers came. And when I went to get my papers, he said, now we're going to give you 30 days, called it terminal leave, because I hadn't had any other leave all the time I was in the Navy, except that 7 days I'd come home from Chicago. Never been on any leave since then. So they're going to give me 30 days, and then I'd have enough points, because I only needed like 1 more point, and that month would give me that 1 point. And then I was to report for discharge from the Navy. And so the guy said, now you'll, when your leave's up, then you'll go on to Galveston, Texas for your discharge. And I said, why would I go clear to Galveston, Texas? You have a discharge center right down here at Long Beach. Well, he said, Arizona and New Mexico are in the Texas zone area. And so I said, I don't think so. I think, and I said, you need to check here. And he said, okay, I'll check and make sure. And I wasn't leaving immediately. It was a day or two before I was going to go. So I go back to the barracks where Whittle and these other guys are. And I get to thinking, I loaned a guy who was on the Tigrone with me and had also gotten off when I did and was in the crew that went to Japan. And so I was with him all the way through time in Japan and back to Guam and back to Pearl Harbor. And then he didn't come to the West Coast. He was going to go around through the Panama Canal and to New Orleans area because he lived in Texas. And I got to thinking that he had asked me to loan him $500 to pay some gambling debts that he had there, the guys, and I trusted him, and I trust him again. And that he would, as soon as he got home, he'd send the money to me. Now, I say, I trusted that guy, and so I let him have the $500, which was most of what I had just left. I just didn't draw my pay, just let it build up because I didn't need the money. And so I just let it grow. And so I had about $575 or some such on the book, which is a lot of money then. So I drew it and gave it to him. And so then we got to Pearl Harbor, and then he didn't go with us on the Nevada to go to the West Coast. He was going to go on another ship. So I take the Nevada, and on all this time waiting there in Mare Island and all this, so I didn't actually get home till our anniversary, which was the 19th of December. Now we'd left Japan the 1st of November. We'd gotten into Long Beach in time for Thanksgiving. Now here we are not getting home from over there till 19th of December. But we finally got home. Now I'm thinking that Sigelski's going to have that money sent to the house. Because I gave him an address, it's probably Cleone's. Or maybe you had the apartment by then for us.
I did.
But no money came, wasn't there. And so anyway, did I call you from Long Beach, from Mare Island?
Yeah, they had to call the neighbors, 'cause I didn't have a phone.
Yeah, and you said that the money hadn't come yet.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I went back into the office of that yeoman there in Mare Island, and I said, have you changed my discharge from Galveston to Long Beach? And he said, well, not yet, but I will. And I said, don't, leave it alone. I said, I want to go to Galveston for discharge. So just leave it that way. And so he said, well, okay, if you want me to. I figured if that money hadn't come from Sigelski, he lived in Houston. Well, I would be right there by Houston, and I'd go find out where my money was. I had his address and his uncle's address and a bunch of stuff. So we stayed. When I came home then, why, there were a lot of advantages to doing it that way. If I would have had him change it to Long Beach, the Navy would have paid my way from Mare Island to Long Beach, period. I would have had to have paid it from Long Beach to Phoenix, and then from Phoenix back to Long Beach. I'd had to pay that. But by having it in Galveston, the Navy paid my way from from Mare Island to Galveston, Texas, and back to Phoenix. Now, so that was a lot of money. All that travel was going to cost a lot of money, and they gave me everything I needed for that. Now, while I was home the 30 days, the money still never came. But just about 2 days before I left to go to Galveston, we got a letter. and Sigelski was from Sigelski, and he was still in Hawaii, got a job there in Hawaii. And in the letter, he said, I'm really sorry about this. I lost your address, and I stayed here in Hawaii. I'm working here, and I have the money. He said, I've sent it to my uncle, and he'll have it sent to you, so you're all right. Now, he didn't know I was worried about him, but he did that. He said, the money's there, and it'll be back to you. Well, now, I could have saved that trip to Galveston, except that when it came 30 days were up, Roy, my brother Roy, was flying out of Williams Field out here. And he had to make a trip back to Macon, Georgia in the C-47. And this was just one day before I was going to be leaving anyway to go to Galveston. So Roy said, well, hey, come out here to my place, we'll go out to the field, and I'll fly you down to Ellington Field. And that's just up the road a ways from Galveston. And I'll fly you over there. And I said, and that's a long train ride too. I wasn't that thrilled about going on the train ride. But anyway, the cards were dealt, and Sigelski was accounted for, and so I'd go ahead and make the trip. So Roy flew me over and landed me at Ellington Field. And I just walked over to probably took a base bus out to the road in front of it, stuck my thumb out. First car came, picked me up, and took me right down to Galveston. So then I got my discharge there. And they paid me some money, and they sewed a thing on my shirt up here, my jumper that showed I was discharged. Called it the ruptured duck. It was a thing here. They had women in the discharge center there, just took your blouse and sewed that on there so it'd show you were now out of the service. And so then I caught the train and came back home here. But at least instead of having to pay to go from Long Beach to Phoenix and from Phoenix back to Long Beach, now I was paid to go from Mare Island all the way to Galveston, and I'd flown 3/4 of that with Roy, so I didn't spend that money. So I came out with money in my pockets, travel money.
But you had to take the train home.
I had to take the train home from down there, yeah, but Roy flew me down there. So I made money on the deal, rather than being out all that money to pay my own transportation back for it. And then, sure enough, by the time I got home, why, here was the check from Sigelski's uncle with all the money. So I never doubted that he would do it. I just wondered why he hadn't done it as soon as he said he would, but it never occurred to me that he was going to cheat me out of it. I knew him too well. I've been on the Tigrone with him ever since we started there in Portsmouth in July of '44. I'd been with him all the time, so I knew him very well, and I never thought he'd do anything wrong, and he didn't. So that's what happened there at discharge time.
Time for the one where the guy, well, you're on the all the trading at the gate.
Oh, trading
All the trading,
in
and then the
Japan?
time that the guy tried to kill you
Oh,
on the ship.
well, yeah, on the tender, when we were in Japan, why, we were, of course, going ashore every day and standing watch over there. 6, 7, 8 hours, depends. Some shifts were longer. The day shifts were longer than the night shifts. And so we were over there guarding the base. And the Japanese would come up to the gate, primarily the women, and some kids with them, but not many men came up. They'd come up to the gate and they wanted to soap, and they wanted cigarettes, of course, and they wanted sugar, and they wanted cloth, the material, so they could make clothes. And rice, of course, they wanted food, but they weren't coming in there begging. They would bring in cameras, pretty Japanese dolls, really nice stuff to trade you. They'd want to trade you for these things. Well, we could buy soap and all this stuff in the BX there. Some of the guys filled their canteens, instead of putting water in it before they went over on watch, they filled it full of sugar and took it over there. We found one of the caves there about 100 yards from where our lookout post was. It was just full of rice. These were mesh bags woven out of reeds or stuff like that. It wasn't a cloth bag. It was and so it was easy to stick your finger through there and then rice would leak out. So you were careful not to do that. But here's all this rice in the caves there. Here was bolts of material. And this material, much of it had come from England. So we don't know how long it had been there, whether they'd got it when they captured Singapore or some of those places and had brought it up there. But they were bolts of material, just like you'd see in a store where they sell it. And these people wanted this, and they were willing to trade you things for it. And so we'd just go down there, get a sack of rice out of the cave. But we were taking that stuff out to the sea and dumping it in Tokyo Bay anyway, where it was 300 feet deep out in the middle of that bay. We're just dumping it out there. As well as ammunition and all kinds of stuff. We're just throwing it out there.
Those caves were off limits at one point.
Well, the one where the guns were was. Well, anyway, where the binoculars were. Yeah, but anyway, we'd just go down there, get those bags of rice and bring them up and give them to those ladies. And give them these bolts of material, give them the whole bolt. There'd be hundreds of yards on that bolt. We just give it to them. And we figured it belonged to them anyway. It didn't belong to us. And we weren't going to bring it back to the States to feed any poor people or anything. All that stuff would end up just being trashed. And so we just gave it to those people. But they were really appreciative, and they'd bring us some really nice things. I had some little miniature samurai swords and stuff like. I guess I still have them someplace.
I have them in the World War II box.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of nice stuff that they brought. I got a nice camera there, but I took a lot of pictures then around Japan. But they just were eager to trade, and then then he's talking about a cave being off limits. There was one of the caves wasn't right there on our beat. It was through a tunnel that the roadway came through a tunnel there under one of the hills. And that tunnel was about 100 yards long. And just beyond that was a cave, and that had a padlock on it. And so these guys that were over in that area were real curious about why that was padlocked shut. Most of the others weren't. And so one of the guys gets a hacksaw blade when he's back on the ship and took it over there with him. And when nobody's looking, this enlisted guy takes that blade, didn't need the saw, he just had the blade. And he got in back there and he cut the rivets that held the hasp in there. The hasp, you got the hasp and you got the dealie that goes over it this way, and then the lock goes through there to keep this thing from being pulled back off. And he sawed the rivets off on the hasp, and so that just left the hasp in the, whatever you call the part you close over it, and the lock were on there. When it was pushed like this, you just looked normal. But you could just pull it away like this and open the door, because he'd sawed the rivets off the back of the hasp. And so we get in there, and here are shelf after shelf of binoculars. The 749s. We used 750s on the Tigrone. That was the standard for us. But these were 749s that looked almost the same as ours. And there were, we figured, 3,000 pair of them in there. And this was a place where they brought them to be repaired also, because they had shelves with parts and tools in there, that workbenches and that, where they repaired the binoculars. Well, that was too much temptation for these guys, so I went over there. We'd go over there when the officers went around. We'd go through the tunnel and over there, even though that wasn't our area. And if we saw the Jeep coming, we just hid, got back behind the building or someplace till he left, and then we'd come back out. And if he got over to where our station was, and he says, hey, where's Harris and so, they'd say, well, I don't know, a while ago we went down the waterfront there, down to check out those caves, be sure nobody was messing with those. And so the officer would leave, because he wasn't going to sit around there waiting for me to come back. Well, we went in there and picked out a nice pair of 740s and a nice pair of 649s, I mean
1050.
Well, that little pair that I have are only, I think 6 power and 30 millimeter field, where the others were 7 power and 49 millimeter field.
That's what he
Yeah.
brought me for a present. That's what you brought me for a present.
Yeah. And then there was 2 halves of a pair of binoculars in there, and they looked to be the same, and so I got those and just put them together. But I learned later that they weren't from the same pair of glasses, and that when you looked through them, one took a different adjustment or something than the other one did. But I had it anyway, and so we took these back to the ship, and we took them back under our clothes because the officers checked us as we went to and from the ship to be sure we weren't taking stuff from the ship over there or taking stuff over there back to the ship. Now, you could get a written permission slip to take something, but they weren't about to give you one for binoculars and some of those things. And in one of those others, they found those 5 Browning automatic shotguns. And they're semi-automatic, I guess you'd say.
New? Were they-
Brand new ones, beautiful guns. They're made in Belgium. Beautiful guns.
Browning was made in Belgium.
But the officers found out that we had discovered them. I hadn't. It was Sigelski and some of those guys were on that post. And so they went in there and got them and took them into their office. They were using one of the Navy buildings, Jap Navy buildings for an office. Took them in there, had Krebs or some of the carpenters over on the ship build a nice box that just for those guns. And in fact, 2 boxes had them, however many they had, they were in 2 boxes. And sealed them up, nail lids on them, and had them in the back room of this building they were using for an office. Well, these dumb sailors that, you know, Japs didn't really have a chance when you think about it, because no matter what they did, these sailors were going to outsmart them. They just, no way the Japanese were going to outsmart these guys. So the next thing we know, we get word that the guys have gone through the back window of this building, got the cases out of there, took them out into the Tules there, because there are a lot of mountains and hills in the base there, and that any one of us that wanted one of these shotguns, boy, we could have it. And so next thing I know, here comes one of the guys bringing from their post down there, bringing me one of these Browning automatics, and gave it to me. Well, now, I didn't want to take it back to the ship. I was afraid to, because I figured I really would end up in prison this time. So I had it hidden there on the base by my post. We had a guy named Mullins, lived in Tucson. After the war, he was a truck driver out of Tucson there. But anyway, Mullins wanted that shotgun. And I said, okay, Mullins, I'd like to have it, but I'm afraid to take it out of here. We said, I'm not afraid. Okay, then it's yours. So what we did, we took the shotgun apart, so he wasn't so long. He had the barrel down his pants here, and he had the stock and that up in this part of his coat. But we waited until it was a rainy day, until it was really raining pretty good. And because we were there for more than 2 months. So anyway, picked this rainy day when we had raincoats and everything on us. And the officers weren't going to want to stand out there in the rain too long checking us. So they were more likely to say, well, go on, get in the boat. Let's get out of here before we're getting soaking wet. So anyway, I said to Mullins, now here, this is what we do. You go 2 guys ahead of me in the line as we were going down to get down into the big whale boat that's going to take us back out to the submarine tender that's anchored out there a half a mile away. You get in front of me, I'll be back here, and I'm going to have my arms inside my raincoat, and I'm going to be pushing my raincoat out here just as far as it'll go, and they will see me, because I'll just be conspicuous as I can. I'll just do everything to attract their attention. And so, and then they won't even look at you. They'll be looking at me back there and saying, uh-oh, that guy's got something. We're going to get him when he gets up here. And they'll let you go right on by because they won't be looking at you. And so that's exactly what we did. I'm back there. He's walking along almost stiff-legged with that rifle down, but they're not even looking at him. They're looking back there at me because I've got the world in here. And so when I get up there, this officer says, hold it. Just a minute. Said, what do you got inside your coat? And I said, my arms. Open that coat up. Well, I said, I can't. My arms are inside there. Said, well, then I'll unbutton it. So he unbuttons it down and put my arms out. And I said, my arms are getting all wet, so I just put them in here. I said, is there anything wrong with that? Well, no. He looks, okay, go on. Well, Mullins was already down the boat now with the shotgun. I don't know just how the other guys got theirs off, but all those guns were taken by different ones of these guys. They must have figured out some way like that too. But Mullins brought that shotgun all the way back home and had it down there in Tucson. And I would like to have it, but I didn't think it looked good for a Mormon boy to get sent to naval prison, so I wasn't going to get involved in it. I let him have it.
I didn't stop you before.
At least this time you could have had a shotgun to show for it.
Well, I had some mittens to show for it and
He
some
brought home that
raincoats.
gun. He broke it down. It was sticking out of the sea bag.
Well, that
that came
big
to
goose
me.
shotgun that I have, but I had that legally. I checked that through and they
And here it was, just sticking out of the top of the sea bag. He had written my address at Cleon's, and here's this gun.
the barrel sticking out to you. Well, that had has a 39-inch barrel on it. So even though we broke it down, it was still sticking out the top of the sea bag.
And he had a real nice present for me when I got home, and here was a pair of binoculars. I really wanted those.
Well, it was the best thing we got over there, was those binoculars.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a lot of fun. Oh, and then the officers, they went to that cave where the binoculars were. They guess were going to get some for themselves, and they opened it when they unlocked the lock on the door. Well, the hasp just fell on the ground because there wasn't anything holding it on the door. It just fell off when they took the lock out. And so opened the door, and there wasn't one single pair of binoculars left in there. There were some lenses, there were parts that they'd been working on, some of them, but not one complete set of binoculars in there. Well, now they knew that there was 3,000 pair of those gone someplace. So they, after we left Japan and headed out to sea then, heading for Guam, why they put out the word, oh, look, first they had a search. They had a search on the tender while we were still sitting there in Tokyo Bay, and told everybody, all hands are to be out on deck, nobody's to be in the sleeping quarters or anywhere in there, out on deck, certain time. So we were all out there. Now I had my binoculars, but I'd taken them up to the carpenter shop and had Krebs. He took a keg of nails, turned it upside down, took the bottom out, took out enough of the nails that my binoculars would fit in there. Then he put the bottom back in, turned it back upside down, set it over here with all the other kegs.
Like hiding the golden plate.
And so that's where my binoculars were. So one of the guys actually sawed a hole in the ductwork, the cooling ductwork, sawed a slit down it, put his binoculars up inside of the duct, then put a piece of tape, because the ducts were taped at various places anyway, put a piece of tape down the strip that he'd sawed in there. They never thought of that there's anything up in there. But they went through every locker, everything that they could think of to check, and they never found one single pair of binoculars, not one.
So everybody managed to hide 3,000 pairs of binoculars?
Well, some of the guys had traded their binoculars for some other things to other people, but probably 2,500 of those were still on that ship, and they never found them. So then they said, as we got out to sea, heading back, now you need to get permission to take these things ashore. When you get back to the States, you have to have a, well, like you do now if you're coming from a foreign country, you have to declare them. So they gave us some forms to fill out, the things we had. Well, they said, and you can have one pair of binoculars. Now they knew all these were on the ship, but they hadn't found one of them. You can have one pair. Well, so I took the big pair and declared those. The little pair I still kept hidden, and they never found them, and I brought those all back. The other pair that didn't quite match, somebody swiped those from me somewhere, but I didn't feel that bad about it because the guy probably went blind. After looked through them a while, it probably went blind. So it served him right. And anyway, you can't stand other thieves. I know that that's just intolerable to have other thieves around. But here, they okayed everything that I had to take home, because it was dolls and things like that. But one of the guys, and they were doing this out on the deck. So you got a walkway here, maybe 6 feet wide from the railing over to where the doors, the hatches are going inside the parts of the ship. And so they had desks right out here on the deck. And so we're walking along this walkway, and we put our stuff down there, and they checked to see if we filled out the proper forms and identified everything correctly. Well, this one guy in the line right ahead of me, he had a telegrapher's key, just a regular key. And the officer picked that up and he says, "You aren't supposed to have this." And the guy says, reaches over and he takes it out of his hand and he says, "What's the matter with it?" "Well, you're just not allowed to have it." And the guy said, "Okay." And he just threw it over the railing out into the ocean. And that officer's mouth dropped open. He says, "Well, you said I couldn't have it, so I'm not taking it home with me." And the officer didn't say a word. He just sat there.
You're not getting it either.
Let the other guy. But that's so funny. That would never occurred to me to do that. But it was the perfect response. Just, "Oh, okay," and threw it over the side. We're going along out at sea. But it was funny. The Japs couldn't outsmart us, and our own officers couldn't outsmart us either. We got all that stuff home, and
I'm surprised you didn't bring the keg of nails.
well, I didn't know I'd need any nails at that time, so I probably still had some nails from sack at home. Those guys would get off work and they'd start, when the whistle would sound, they'd start running for the checkout place because there were 4,000 of us there, and so there'd be a long line. You had to pick up your punch card, time card, and punch it out and put it back in another rack, so nobody wanted to be on the end of the line. So these guys are running over there, and they're doing, their aprons are full of nails, and they're just pulling them out like this and throwing them on the ground. I mean, just, you just had nails everywhere out there where the guys just throw them out of their pockets. And of course, you didn't have many vehicles driving around in there, so we weren't puncturing tires, but they sure wasted a lot of nails. That never made any sense to me. They could have stopped 5 minutes early and taken the nails out and put them back in the kegs, but they'd rather just run throwing them out. Because you weren't supposed to carry them out of the base with you, out of
So they just threw
the
them in
camp
the dirt.
down there. So that's how they'd get them out of their aprons.
Well, Grandpa, we're running out of tape. We have, this is our last tape, and we're down to probably a few minutes left. Even though I have more stories on here than I want to hear, but I think Bryan had something specific.
Well,
Yes, something else?
I just wanted to see if you had any words of advice or testimony that you would like your posterity to hear from you.
You think this will land a bunch of them in the Ooskow if they hear this?
There will at least be some great
Well-
grandchildren that can see this, so.
I guess the counsel I would give them is that whatever is your responsibility, do it. And it may not always be something you like to do, but if it's you're responsible for it, then do it. Whether you're going to have to go off to war, or whether you're going to go off on a mission, or whether you're going to go off on a job that's the best for you, but maybe you don't think so at the time. But there's just a lot of people in this world that are unhappy and unsuccessful because they just won't take responsibility. And they have opportunities staring them in the face, and they won't do it because of some petty thing that they think, well, I just wouldn't want to do that, or I wouldn't like that, or I'd rather do this. And I've seen a lot of people who spend a lot of money going to medical school, dental schools, law schools, and gave up the practice, gave up their license soon after they worked at it, because it wasn't really what they ought to be doing and really wanted to do. Some of them went to medical school because Dad was a doctor and made lots of money, so they were going to go just to make a lot of money. And then they found out that that just was not pleasant and fun for them to do. So the counsel is you ought to figure out some hobbies that you'd like to have. Find some things that if you didn't ever have to work, that this is how you'd spend your time. And then find a job that relates to that. And that way, when you go to work, you're not mad or unhappy or whatever. You go to work and you look forward to it because it's pleasant to be there, and you're going to have some neat experiences there. And if more people would do that, why, production would be a lot better. People would be a lot happier, and the people around them would be a lot happier. Because there's nothing worse than to be working with some guy that's always grumbling about how much he hates the job. And your grandpa's outspoken enough that more than once he said, well, there are other jobs out there. Why don't you quit and go get one of them? Because these people around here don't want to listen to you griping and complaining. If you don't like it, get out of here. I told more than one that he ought to go be a cotton picker or something else, more than one teacher. You shouldn't even be in this business. You don't like kids, you don't like your subject, you don't like anything about education. Why don't you quit and get out here and go do something you like? and they still kept electing me to the campus committee every election. Because I said it like it was.
Tell them how you got your job after you got home from the war, if there's time enough.
From which?
After you got home from the service, how you got your job?
Oh, well, they let the veterans run an ad in the newspaper, free, and you could tell them what your qualifications were and what kind of job you're looking for. So it was in the job listings in the paper. So I went down there and I put down good typist and excellent driver. I didn't know what I was going to be. In fact, I even had told them when I checked out of the Navy that I thought I'd like to work for the post office, like to have a civil service job. But anyway, I put down on there good typist and excellent driver. Well, it ran in the paper, and on Sunday. And that day, Grandma and I had gone over to Mesa, come back over here to Mesa because to see Grandpa and Grandma Richards and the other, and our folks weren't living here then, they were in Phoenix. And when we got back that night,
We rode the bus over.
yeah, I rode the bus over. That night, got back, the neighbor came over and said, there was a man here looking for you today. Said his name is Roger Levine. He says he's county recorder and he'd like to talk to you. And that, would you come down to his office tomorrow morning? And so I said, well, yeah, good, thanks. I appreciate you taking the message. So I went down to the office and so he talked with me a while and he had me write my name a couple of times because he was really big on good signatures. And so he said, well, we can use you. And I said, I can't hire you as a deputy recorder because you aren't 21 yet. But when you turn 21, which wasn't going to be very far off.
You already fought in a war, but you couldn't
that's
hire
right.
you because you weren't.
And I
21.
couldn't vote. I wasn't even a registered voter. I couldn't vote till I was 21. But that didn't bother me. I mean, I didn't care. I figured, hey, when I'm 21, I'll get to vote. Everybody shouldn't vote. The next thing they want 10-year-olds to be voting. So anyway, I said, that's okay. So he hired me as a clerk. And then as soon as I turned 21, well, he hired me, but he had to get it okayed by the county board of supervisors. And so he told me, come back tomorrow. They're meeting tomorrow, and I'll get it okayed anyway. I won't have any trouble getting it okayed. So then I came back and we went to work. And then when I turned 21, then they changed it to deputy county recorder. Then I could sign documents and do things down there that I couldn't do as a
That's when you
clerk.
got your notary seal.
Yeah, then a little later, Roger King was a notary there in the office, and sometimes people brought papers in that